Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 13, a deeper look into socialization. Yeah, definitely. So when we want to talk about the trainer's perspective, what we want to do is try to frame our version of what we think socialization and all things that are involved with that entail in a way that's kind of digestible for people. So let me give this a quick shot here and then you can dive right in.
Cool.
So right from the beginning, from a trainer's perspective, something that I notice about socialization is in order to work around people's people's like tendency to oversimplify, I try to be clear from the jump that socialization is a moving target that kind of depends from dog to dog what exactly they need. And I think a good point that you made just a second ago was people, for example, think play is social time or whatever the case. And it very well may be, I guess, depending on the situation. And I'll give an example here in a bit. But here's an example of where maybe play isn't the proper way to socialize, because sometimes proper socialization doesn't necessarily mean the dog wants to be super friendly with every single person on the block. Sometimes it just means we're traveling and I don't want you reacting or nervous, but I just need you to do what I need you to do. Right. Like a working dog or whatever the case. So if you have like a really boisterous puppy who thinks it's their job to go and pull to, for positive reasons to go and interact with every dog and person they see, that's still not good socialization, but for a very different reason than if we had, say, a dog that was like deathly afraid of motorcycles and garbage trucks and things like that.
Right.
So I'll just give a quick example and then I'll let you jump right in here. So
cool.
I've got another foster dog, and this one again is feral, trapped, like in a trap. He was hanging out with us with the rescue that I work with. He was with them for a couple weeks, and he's a very, very actually dog social friendly kind of puppy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's interesting. He comes up to people and he's excited to see you, tail wagging, but the second you move to touch him, he's gone. And if you put a leash on him, he bites right through it. Try to put him in a crate, he's not having it. So he definitely had his like issues to him. And so we finally got him here to the house. I got him in a crate, got him on a leash, and he's doing well. It's been like 10 days now. So his socialization process is going to look very different than the board and train puppy who I've got coming in a few days. He needs to learn how to open up. The puppy's already open, and I want to keep it that way, but she needs to learn how to dial it back. It's all about finding that happy medium.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I really like that analogy. It's a moving target.
Right. It is.
It is a moving target because, the movement is age development. The movement is the way the dog reacts to different stimulus, it makes it harder to hit it, on a bullseye. But yeah, no, I think that's a really great perspective. Some of the perspectives that I have when it comes to dog socialization and the requirements, right? There isn't as we talked about many times before, there isn't a one size fits all standard to what dog socialization should be,
right?
Because it really depends on context, right? So like if you live in the mountains or have acreage and you have a dog or two dogs, like the amount of socialization you need there is very different than if you live in an apartment building with 60 other dogs. Right. So socialization has, in essence, to do what your standard and what your context is. Right. So usually what we see, dogs who live more urban or suburban lifestyles, these dogs require more socialization. Right. These dogs have to be more social because they're constantly in bigger, they're running into more people, more dogs, more distractions, more strange human type living. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. Versus if a dog lives in the hills and the mountains on a ranch, the amount of socialization that the dog needs is very different. Now, one thing across the board that is really, really important is that we need to make sure that dogs are very heavily socialized with human beings, right? Doesn't necessarily mean they have to love every human being, but at least the dog needs to learn friend, foe, to discriminate, to be able to see, what's going on. Because at the end of the day, there's many dogs who can live a happy life, never going to the dog park because they live a life with humans. But it's as soon as dogs cross the line of showing human aggression that their lives actually get in risk, right? They start having a risk and a liability in regards that can affect the dog's livelihood. Right. So human socialization is one of the most important things. Veterinary behaviorist and dean of dog training, Ian Dunbar, he's quoted to say, an unsocialized dog is far more dangerous to humans than a wild wolf or a wolf in the wild. right? And so that kind of seems like, well, that's kind of far fetched. Like, what do you mean by that? Well, what he means is, when it comes to this different species of a wolf to a dog, a wolf keeps far, far away from humans, right? Like if a wolf smells a human, downwind, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
They don't fuck with humans. Versus a dog has genetic predisposition to want to bond with people, right? So if I have a dog who's unsocialized, who is attracted towards human beings and bonding with human beings, well, he might like one, he might like two human beings, but he'll have no problem telling the other human beings he doesn't like that he doesn't like them. Right. So in that context, Ian Dunbar's saying that an unsocialized dog is a greater threat to people than a wild wolf.
Yeah,
Right.
because at that point we're talking about the potential for just, like a crime of
Human
circumstance.
interaction. Yeah.
Right. The
Human
dog is
interaction.
just around. And so of course, like if you have two things that don't mesh in the same vicinity, now we're playing with fire a little bit. So yeah, I agree with that. Whereas a
Yeah.
wolf knows we don't do this and they do what they need to do in order to avoid because they know
Yeah.
the hole in their game is there.
Yeah. They exactly. It's very black and white and with their behaviors.
Right.
So the reason I want to bring up context is because, as you mentioned, it's a moving target. Different personalities need different things. I guess an easy way to look at it, dogs who are very exuberant and dogs who are very engaging with the environment need to kind of learn manners, right? They need to learn limits. They need to learn patience. They need to learn self-control. And all of these things are prerequisites to what we'll talk about later, which we call social skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you think of even human social skills, saying please and thank you, sharing, teamwork, problem solving, all of these things only exist if we have self-control, patience,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if a dog doesn't have that, their socialization career falls very short very quickly. So factors of, what our lifestyle is really important. Also factors of what our dog's predispositions are. So if our dogs are hypersensitive, so we see some dogs on the spectrum who are literally more sensitive. They feel things more, they hear things better, they see things better, they smell things stronger. It's easier for dogs like that to become overwhelmed. So if we have a dog who easily gets overwhelmed, this dog usually requires a little bit more desensitization, a lot more exposure. And in essence, we have to kind of isolate certain weaknesses with that dog just to help them survive in whatever world it is that they're living in, right? To just help them cope and deal with it. Versus if we have a dog who's fearless and engages with the world no matter what, right? He could see the scariest thing in the world and want to play with it, like my dog. Sometimes we have to teach them limits because on both sides of the spectrum, from the very overwhelmed and introverted and sensitive side to the very engaging, assertive, confident side, and everything in between, socialization is really about balancing through different stages of development, through the puppy's developmental fear stages, and through the dog's hormonal shifts, right? That's just like trying to keep a child well-mannered for the first 18 years of his life. It's a struggle for parents. It's definitely a struggle. But I would say, and I want to pass this over to you, the struggle is really the struggle is not a struggle if we make it a point to have influence over our dogs.
Yeah, like if this makes sense, the struggle is less of a struggle when you don't try to put like a hard line of control on it and kind of understand that it is a moving target and just flow with it. And what I mean is, because I don't want to sound like weird and abstract and not helpful. So what I mean is, much like when we talked in our last episode about balance training, socialization just in and of itself, it's kind of one piece of the dog training puzzle, but when you dissect it deeper, there's lots of elements to it. So absolutely, you're totally right about the dog's surroundings matter. If a dog is out in the country and their next neighbor's 60 acres away, then it's kind of a different story than if we're like living in LA right in downtown, people all over the place. Also, even if we have two people living in LA, same circumstance, but maybe the people's expectations are different. Let's say one of them wants a protection dog, one of them wants a puppy, one of them, that makes a difference. And then, of course, there's, like we talked about in the past, ages and stages, they change so much. I mean, the way that you socialize a 6-month-old dog can be quite different than that exact same dog at a year and a half, 2 years old, because their behaviors and their mannerisms and understandings of the world will just be different. Therefore, their reactions will be different accordingly. So you have to look at things. I kind of think of it like a camera lens where it's just like glass, 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 and the light's like kind of moving around all the way through. And so you
Mhm.
kind of figure out like you're looking at things through a series of different like viewpoints and trying to mesh them up as best you can and understand that all the while they're going to keep moving, so you keep moving with it. And as far as I can tell, that's been my most accurate and effective way, at least thus far, to think of it kind of in my own head as I find a way to describe it to clients.
Right, right.